I'll never forget that Thanksgiving. I try not to, even though most people would want to bury it deep and never think about it again. I was 17 at the time, visiting my cousins in Jupiter, Florida. It was supposed to be a normal, happy holiday. Turkey roasting in the oven, mashed potatoes simmering on the stove, and the smell of pumpkin pie drifting through the air. I remember stepping into the house and being hit by the warmth. The living room was buzzing with laughter, my aunts and uncles talking about football, and the kids running around like they always did. The kind of chaos that makes a house feel alive. We hadn't seen some of our family in months, and for the first time in a while, it felt like everyone was together. I was helping my cousin Lisa set the table. She had just become pregnant, and everyone was excited about the news. I remember her laughing as she tried to balance the silverware and the stacks of plates. My other cousin, Michael, was in the kitchen, pretending to be the turkey master chef, though he really just ended up spilling gravy more than anything else. The kids were arguing over seats as usual, and my uncle was telling the same football story for the third time, everyone pretending to listen. It was ordinary, comfortable, safe. We were a few hours into dinner when I first noticed something was off. I can't really explain it. At first, it was just a feeling, the way you sometimes get a chill for no reason. The laughter and chatter felt muted, like the house itself was holding its breath. I remember pausing mid-sentence and looking around. The kids were still running, still screaming with laughter, but there was a tension under the surface I couldn't place. It started with a knock at the door, just one knock, sharp and loud, and it immediately silenced the room. My uncle looked up from his plate, frowning. "Who's that at this hour?" he muttered. No one moved for a moment. Then someone said, "Maybe it's just a neighbor?" But the doorbell didn't ring again, and no one outside called out. Just that one knock. Something about it made my stomach knot. Dinner went on, but the atmosphere had shifted. Conversations felt strained. Smiles were forced. Every sound, the clink of silverware, the scraping of chairs, seemed louder than it should have. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was just imagining things. Maybe the smell of too much turkey had made me jittery. A few minutes later, my cousin Michael went into the kitchen to check the turkey. That's when I first heard it, an almost imperceptible sound, like a footstep upstairs. Our house only had one floor, no second story. I froze. "Did you hear that?" I whispered to Lisa. She shook her head. "It's probably just the floor settling. Don't be weird." But she didn't sound convincing, and neither was I. I knew I'd heard it. Something wasn't right. The rest of dinner passed in uneasy silence. We tried to keep conversation going, tried to laugh at the little things, but it felt hollow. Every time the kids screamed, my heart jumped, not because of them, but because the sound echoed too sharply, like it didn't belong in the house anymore. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was sudden, a sound so sharp, so violent that I can still hear it when I close my eyes. A gunshot, one, then another. And in that instant, everything went wrong. I don't remember thinking. I only remember reacting, grabbing my little cousin and pulling him under the table. The world reduced to screams and chaos. The adults were moving, some running, some frozen, and I could hear Lisa shouting my name somewhere in the mess. The air smelled like smoke and fear, not turkey and pumpkin pie. I don't know how long it lasted. Seconds? Minutes? It felt like hours. And then, as suddenly as it began, there was silence. I dared to lift my head, and I will never forget what I saw. People I loved, family, lying on the floor, motionless, the laughter, the chaos, the warmth of the house, all gone, replaced by an emptiness that swallowed me whole. I can still feel the panic, the helplessness. I don't remember much of what happened after that. Neighbors came rushing in, police sirens filled the night, and everything felt unreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. In the days that followed, we tried to make sense of it. We learned that Paul, my cousin, had done it. He was part of the family, but he'd changed. No one saw it coming. No one could explain why. Questions piled up faster than answers, but the hardest part was the quiet. The way the house now felt too big, too empty, and too loud at the same time. I've gone back to that house only a handful of times. Each visit is like stepping into a memory that wants to swallow me. The walls seemed to echo the past, the laughter of kids frozen in time, the arguments that once felt trivial now loaded with tragedy. And every Thanksgiving, I remember. I remember how normal it was, how ordinary the day started, and how quickly it turned into something unrecognizable. It's a lesson I've carried with me ever since, that horror can come when you least expect it, not from monsters or ghosts, but from the people around you, from those you trust. I don't share this often. Most people would rather forget, but sometimes I tell it slowly, carefully, so that it's not just a memory, but a warning. Be present, notice the little things, trust your instincts. That's all I can do. Because I've learned something the hard way. No holiday, no matter how happy, is guaranteed to be safe, and no family, no matter how close, is immune to darkness. I can still feel that night in my bones. Thanksgiving, 1985. It was supposed to be ordinary, warm, happy. My cousin Susan's family lived in a small trailer at Hilltop Mobile Home Park, just outside Fort Worth, Texas. I remember thinking how cozy it looked from the outside, lights glowing through the windows, smoke curling from the little chimney vent. Inside, it was chaotic in the best way. Kids running around, adults talking, laughter bouncing off the walls. I remember Angela, my cousin, teasing her brother Robert, who rolled his eyes but couldn't hide a smile. Michael, my cousin's older cousin, leaned back, quiet but enjoying the noise. Joe, the dad, was telling some story I didn't catch because I was too busy helping Susan with the table. Plates stacked, silverware clinking, smells of turkey and pie filling the trailer. It all felt normal. Safe. Then, something small happened. A knock at the door. Just one. Sharp, sudden. Everyone paused. No one said anything. Susan glanced toward the window and shook her head. "Probably just a neighbor," she said, but I could see she wasn't sure. I shrugged it off. Maybe it was nothing. But I can still remember that feeling in my chest. The kind of feeling that tells you something is off, even when nothing looks wrong. Later that evening, Joe took Angela, Robert, and Michael to the convenience store. I stayed behind with Susan. The trailer was quiet for a few moments. Then she told me she thought she heard something at the door while they were gone, but she went back to what she was doing, thinking it was nothing. When they returned, the trailer felt exactly the same, like nothing had happened. They stepped inside, laughing, holding small bags of snacks. Then Michael noticed a briefcase on the floor near the door. He picked it up. Angela helped him set it down. It was ordinary looking, tan, slightly worn. They opened it. Then everything changed. The explosion ripped through the trailer. I don't remember thinking. I only remember reacting, grabbing Robert and trying to protect him, trying to make sense of what was happening. The walls shook, the roof rattled, and for a terrifying moment, the world itself seemed to be tearing apart. Smoke, noise, chaos. I couldn't process anything except fear. When the blast ended, silence fell. A heavy, unnatural silence. And then I saw them. Joe, Angela, Michael, gone. My heart stopped. My throat closed. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. I couldn't believe it. My family, my cousins, just vanished in a heartbeat. The days after were even worse. The investigation revealed that the briefcase had contained a bomb. It may not have even been meant for my cousins. Some said it was intended for someone else entirely. But it didn't matter. They had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. We tried to understand it. We tried to make sense of the anger, the grief, the unfairness. But nothing fits. Not neatly, not at all. You keep asking, why? But there are no answers that make sense. You just live with the emptiness. Years later, we learned more about the investigation. The person arrested for it, Michael Roy Toney, claimed innocence, and eventually, the conviction was overturned. But the sense of closure never came. The horror didn't end. It just lingered, like smoke that never fully leaves a room. And every Thanksgiving after, I remember the laughter that filled that trailer, the smell of turkey, the warmth of family, and how in an instant it was all replaced by fear and loss. I remember the knock at the door, the briefcase, the explosion, and the silence that followed. I remember thinking that night, and I still think now. No holiday is guaranteed to be safe. No home is immune. Sometimes tragedy waits in the smallest, most ordinary details. A knock, a package, a simple choice, and you only realize it too late. I tell this story to remind myself, to remember them, and maybe to warn others. Life can change in a heartbeat. The people you love, the world you know, can vanish in a moment you never expected. And all that remains is memory. Thanksgiving was supposed to be a day of warmth, laughter, and gratitude. I'd never imagined it could become a day I'd remember for fear instead of joy, a day where the air itself seemed to turn heavy, thick with something I couldn't name. I was 16 at the time, spending the holiday with my extended family in East Hartford, Connecticut. Their house was small but lively, full of the familiar smells of roasted turkey, baked pies, and stuffing simmering on the stove. I remember walking in, the buzz of conversation wrapping around me like a blanket. My cousins and I were scrambling to claim the best seats at the table, teasing each other, while the adults tried, futilely, to corral the chaos. The football game hummed in the background, a comforting drone beneath the clatter of plates and laughter. Everything felt normal, safe. At first, I remember noticing little cracks under the surface of normalcy. My uncle had been grumbling about bills and expenses. Aunt Linda and my mom exchanged sharp, quick glances that lasted a fraction too long. Plates were passed silently between them, words clipped and uneven. Small things, easily missed, but for some reason I felt the tension. I shrugged it off. It was Thanksgiving. People argue sometimes. After dinner, most of the adults had retreated to the living room, sipping coffee or a late slice of pie, while the kids lingered at the table, chatting and joking. I was helping clear plates when I heard it. A click at the front door. I froze. It wasn't a creak of the floor or the usual tinkle of the wind brushing against the windows. It was deliberate, sharp, quick, and then silence. Probably just a neighbor, my mother said, barely glancing toward the door. But I knew she didn't sound convinced. I couldn't shake the feeling of unease, the tightness in my chest that told me something was wrong. I tried to distract myself, loading the dishwasher, laughing with my cousins, telling myself I was imagining it. But later, that feeling returned, stronger. It started subtly. A sound outside, faint but distinct, footsteps crunching over gravel, a shadow moving just beyond the curtains. I kept checking, but the street was empty. I told myself it was paranoia. Maybe the neighborhood kids had come to play. Maybe it was just the wind. Then came the scream. It tore through the house, sudden and piercing, and my heart stopped in my chest. I bolted toward the sound, almost tripping over chairs. In the hallway, I saw my aunt lying there, her eyes wide with shock. I didn't understand at first. My brain refused to process it. My mouth opened, but no sound came. The adults were on their feet in an instant, rushing toward us. My father grabbed the phone and called 911. My mother knelt beside my aunt, trying to comfort her, trying to make sense of the chaos. I stood frozen, feeling the room spin, my own pulse deafening in my ears. It didn't stop there. Over the next hours, the full horror unfolded. Similar incidents had happened across the state that weekend. Another family, a neighbor, found beaten in their home. Someone else strangled in a nearby town. A string of homicides tied to the same holiday, Thanksgiving, the time we all assumed would be safe. The police arrived in a flurry. Questions were asked, statements taken, and all I could think about was how fragile everything had been, how thin the line between safety and disaster really was. That night, the house felt hollow. The warmth, the laughter, the smells of dinner, they were all gone, replaced by fear, shock, and disbelief. I couldn't sleep for days. Every little sound made me jump. The creak of a floorboard, the hum of a car engine outside, the knock of a branch against the window. My cousins and I whispered in the dark, recounting the events over and over, trying to piece together the moments before the attack, trying to answer questions that had no answers. Every Thanksgiving after, I remember it. I remember the ordinary beginning, the smell of turkey roasting, the kids arguing over seats, the adults laughing, telling stories. And then I remember the moment everything flipped. That first scream, the panic, the chaos. The feeling that the world I knew, my home, my family, my sense of safety, had been ripped away in an instant. In the days that followed, we learned more. Some of the cases remained unsolved. The attacks across the state were linked only by timing and circumstance. Some victims' families never received closure. And that's what haunted me the most, not just the violence, but the unknown. Who had done this? Why? Was it random? Or had someone been watching, waiting for the right moment to strike? I remember standing in the empty living room later, long after the officers left. The table still had some uneaten food, plates stacked unevenly, chairs slightly askew. I could still smell the pie, and yet the room felt hollow, charged with a weight I couldn't lift. I realized then that horror doesn't always need monsters or ghosts. Sometimes it hides in the world, you know. Sometimes it comes from places and people you trust, in moments you think are safe. Years later, I still carry that night with me. I see it when I visit family on holidays. I hear it when I pass by quiet streets, when a knock at the door makes my stomach twist. That Thanksgiving taught me that safety is fragile and that terror can arrive where you least expect it. I tell this story to remember and to warn. Holidays, with all their warmth and cheer, can also be times when danger waits in the shadows. When everyone else is distracted, celebrating, laughing, someone may be watching. And sometimes there is no rhyme or reason, no villain you can point to, only the aftermath and the questions that never go away. Even now, decades later, I remember the terror, the confusion, the smell of food mixed with fear. I remember the way the laughter died, replaced by silence. And I remember how fragile life is, even in the moments that feel safest. Because horror isn't always in the dark corners of the woods or in haunted houses. Sometimes it's right here, in the middle of a Thanksgiving dinner, in a home you thought you knew. Sometimes the nightmare comes without warning, and all you can do is remember it and hope that you notice the warning signs before it's too late.